The C7 Corvette ZR1 is an absolute freaking monster, guys. But just like any other car out there, this thing needs some maintenance. We have to do an oil change today on this particular Corvette, and I'm going to show you how to do it, save some money, and make sure it's done correctly. Let's get right into it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Horsepower Obsessed. As you saw in the intro there, we are in fact changing the oil today in the C7 Corvette ZR1, but there's a couple other things we're going to do as well to make sure that this thing stays running as well as it can for as long as it can. So let's get into all of the information right now. All right, guys, so this is the cabinet full of the goodies we're going to be using today. Of course, my ZR1 is a 2019, which means it requires the new 0w-40 oil. This oil is good for the street or the track, and it also helps keep the valves clean on your C7 Corvette with direct injection. So even though GM only requires this particular oil for 2019 Corvettes, you can actually use this on any one of your C7 Corvette models. I would recommend it, even though it is more expensive than your typical 5w30. And speaking of keeping those valves clean, the next step is going to be to go ahead and add this complete fuel system cleaner from Techron. This is actually the stuff that GM recommends for use in your C7 Corvette. This especially applies to me because the ZR1 is dual injected, direct injection and port injection, meaning under full throttle, this stuff will actually be getting sprayed right on the back of the valves, preventing any future carbon buildup. That does only apply to the ZR1, but this stuff is also very good for any of your C7 Corvettes and keeping the fuel sending unit clean so you don't ever have any problems with your fuel gauge not registering how much gas is actually in the tank. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and change the cabin air filter. This is one of the best cabin air filters I have ever used in any of my cars. So if you guys are interested, that's the part number right there for any of your C7 Corvettes. And of course, I will link all this stuff in the description down below. This should be changed once a year. This car is 2 years old, so I'm kind of anxious to see what kind of surprises await me on this one. Before we get started, let's talk about cost, guys. So this oil here is actually a lot more expensive than your typical 5w30 that other Corvettes have used. This oil is a little more versatile, and it has those extra cleaning agents in it I was talking about, so you will pay more for this. The cheapest I have found is on Amazon. I will link everything in the description down below for you guys to check out, but these can be had for 6 quarts for about $49. Now in my case, I bought 2 boxes, so I have 12 quarts of oil here, even though we're only going to use about 9.5 on the ZR1, so I'll have some extra for next time. I don't have to buy as many. Now that is going to cost you about $100 just for the oil. Now the oil filters, of course, you're looking for the PF64 oil filter. You can also get those on Amazon. Next is the Techron fuel system cleaner, which is a 20-ounce bottle that will cover up to 20 gallons of gas. The C7 Corvette is just a little over a 19-gallon tank, so I will probably just dump all of this in. There's no point in keeping 1 ounce in there just for good measure. So this will cost you right around $8. Lastly is the cabin air filter. This is probably one of the more expensive ones because it does have activated carbon on it, meaning it's going to help keep a lot more out of your car. This one was $18 on Amazon as well. Like I said, all this stuff will be in the description down below if you want to do any of this stuff to your C7 Corvette. This is basically going to be a C7 Corvette maintenance style video, so let's get it done. The C7 ZR1 is up in the air. Like I said, this process will be pretty much the same for any of the C7 Corvettes, not just the ZR1. The thing you're really going to want to look for, though, is these guys right here. These race ramps really make this easy to get the car elevated enough for you to get underneath it and start the oil change process. So what we're going to do, obviously, pop the hood, come under here. We're going to loosen this oil cap so the oil can drain more freely. And then we're going to head under the car, take the drain plug out, and start draining this old oil out. But this is what we're going to need. In this case, I have a 3/8 ratchet with a 15mm socket on it. That's the size of the drain plugs on the C7. Now, if you have the dry sump system, you're going to have 2 15mm drain plugs to take out. If you don't have the dry sump, it's just 1. I also have the tool here, which is a 74/76 oil filter removal tool. So this is also a 3/8 ratchet right here that will clip onto the end of this oil filter, and you can just turn it off rather than fighting with that thing, especially if the last person that did your oil is the dealership. That thing will be on there with the force of 1,000 Thors. So you're going to want to use something like this to get it off without without damaging it or destroying it. Like everything else, guys, this will be linked in the description down below if you're interested. I highly recommend having this tool for the oil change. Obviously, we have the oil pan to drain all the oil into. This will go to my local Advanced Auto Parts afterwards. They actually recycle the used oil there, so I don't have to have it stored in my garage anywhere. So under the car, guys, we have two different drain plugs. This is the ZR1, so we have the dry sump system, but right here is the front plug, like I said, 15 millimeter, and then over here is the second plug, also 15 millimeter, and then the oil filter right here. So we're going to go ahead, drain this, then drain this, then we're going to take that out. Pretty much a no-brainer. If you've done an oil change before, you know the general process, but if you haven't drained one before with a dry sump system, make sure you crack both of these loose and let everything drain out. You can access this one with a socket, but the secondary one over here, you cannot get a socket in here unless you have a real low-profile one. So what I'm going to employ is a 15 millimeter ratcheting box wrench. So you can get that in there pretty easily. Use that to break this free, and then you are good to go. There's the first plug undone. Check out that liquid gold, guys. It's actually not so goldy anymore. This is pretty used apparently. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and clean up the drain plug here. So just a typical shop rag. Make sure that the oil seal there in the back underneath the head of the bolt is good to go. No rips or tears or anything before you reinstall it. Now, next step is obviously going to be the secondary drain plug. We'll do the same thing, inspect everything, make sure it's all good, put it all back together after everything's drained, and then I will catch you guys back here once we're adding the new oil filter. All right, guys, so while everything is still draining underneath the car, I figured I'd come out here and show you the next bit of information, and that's going to be adding the Techron fuel system cleaner to the C7. And obviously, you guys know by now there's no cap here, but this particular spout is actually built for the capless fuel systems because this will actually enter through both doors inside here, so you'll be able to dump this right into the tank without having to mess with funnels or anything. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, this is pretty easy. The instructions say to make sure your tank is near empty, you dump this in and then you go ahead into a gas station and add fuel on top of it to kind of disperse it throughout the entire 19-gallon tank. My tank is already pretty close to empty. It usually is in this thing for some reason. I'm gonna go ahead and take the cap off here, just stick it in there and dump it all into the gas tank. So you don't have to worry about that funnel. You should know that the funnel does come with the car. Depending on if you bought it used or not, you might not get one, but it's really kind of a small opening anyway, so this is a way better way to do it. I'm glad to see some people doing this kind of stuff. Now we'll just go do some spirited driving in Mexico, work that through the system, and we should have some benefits from this particular cleaner. Like I said, the ZR1 has that dual injection, so this will actually make it to the back of the valve. So I'm going to go ahead and lube up the O-ring here on the oil filter, and then we're going to go ahead and screw it onto the oil filter housing so we can then move on to adding the oil. Before you do it though, make sure that the old oil seal from the old oil filter is not still stuck up in the housing there. You'll find out the hard way it was if you don't look. Oil will be everywhere. So in my case, the old seal is still on the bottom of that old oil filter there in the oil pan, so we're good. We got everything buttoned back up here, guys. Both drain plugs put back in, oil filter in. Drain plugs get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds, so both of these, 18 foot-pounds. And then the oil filter, you just want to make sure it is hand tight. So don't put it on real loose, but don't go crazy with it either, because then you won't be able to get it off next time. So now we're going to go up top, add some oil, and we are done. So this is going to take exactly 9.5 quarts with a dry filter. I've done this a million times on C7s before, so I know it comes out to exactly 9.5 quarts. Will put you really, really close to the top on the dipstick. The C7s have kind of an interesting oil level check procedure on the dipstick because you have to let it run for a couple minutes, then shut it off. I'll get into the exact procedure whenever we're actually doing it here at the end. What I wanted to show you guys is something really cool, is this particular oil funnel. Now this is set for GM vehicles. It will literally screw down into the oil fill port here with an rubber O-ring. So just like that, it is now seated in place and it's not going to leak. It's not going to go anywhere. I can literally just start dumping the oil in. It seals in there just like the factory cap will. This is on Amazon. It's not too horribly expensive. I'll link it in the description below if you guys are interested in this. But I really like it because, especially using all these little quarts, you can kind of open it up, set it in there, and literally just let it drain. The way that this funnel's set up, you can kind of just start dumping it and just set it in there just like that, and it will do the rest of the work itself as you're moving on to the next quart. So next we're going to go ahead and get the cabin air filter installed. And this is kind of something you're going to want to do when doing an oil change, because in order to do this the easiest way possible, you have to disconnect some of these hard lines right here to really give yourself enough room to get the new filter in. But ultimately we're just going to remove at least one of these hard lines right here. So if we just push down on this and pull, you can get this hard line disconnected, and it will give you a lot more access to these 3 metal clips right here. That's where the cabin air filter is located, on the passenger side of the car. Here's the hard line disconnected. You just want to push down on this gray piece right here, and then you can just literally pop it off. With that out of the way, I just kind of popped it up on top of the rubber seal. 3 little metal pieces that you'll literally just pull up on out of the way, just like that. As you can see, those are pulled up. And then the third one. And now that gives us access to the door back here that will pop off and pull out of the way. Just like that. With that out, you can see the air filter in there, and we'll pull that out next and start into installing the new one. So you're also going to want to disconnect this line right here to give yourself as much access to that filter back there as possible. It's the same kind of thing. You just want to push down on this gray connector piece here and then just separate the hose just like that. Now you can kind of pull them out of the way enough to give yourself some room to get that air filter out. So we'll go ahead, reach in here and just grab the filter and start pulling it out, which is not overly difficult, but it does take a little bit of finesse. My stock one's not horribly dirty. There's a couple little pieces of stuff in there, but nothing major. As you guys can see, this is the stock one. This is the new one. So the more gray appearance to it is actually activated carbon. So it will help keep odors and smaller allergens out of your cabin more so than the stock one will. This one's a lot more flimsy too. This is a little more stiff, a little bit more rigid, it seems. You'll want to note on the side here, there's an airflow arrow. Obviously we want the airflow going down. So once you put that in, the activated carbon side will go down. So you'll see the white side as you slide it in. So just like the opposite of removal here, we'll just go ahead and slide this one back in. Since I said this one is a little more rigid, it's going to probably be a little harder to get it in there without bending and tearing up some stuff. So just work with it, be patient, get it in there correctly. Now we'll go ahead and put the door back on, put the clips back in place, and reconnect some of the hard plastic oil lines. So as you can tell on the back of the door here, there are some clips that you have to kind of get onto the plastic underneath there. It will clip up underneath just like this, and then you'll pull the door up and put those metal clips back down on the top. Pretty easily seated actually. And then once the door is in place, you can just kind of pop these metal clips back down like so. There's just 3 of them, and then that's it. We're good to go. We'll reconnect the hard oil lines here and you are done. Now what we have to do is get in the car, run it up to operating temperature. So we'll get it up to 175. That's the oil temperature. Once it's up to 175, we're then going to shut the car off and wait 5 minutes and then come over here and check the dipstick. At that point, you'll get an accurate reading with the dry sump system. All right, guys, so we are in the car letting her warm up, and as you can see there, I'm supposed to change my oil soon. So that's gonna be the next thing I'm gonna show you here, is how to actually reset your oil life. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and hit left on the D-pad here on your steering wheel, get into the settings over here, and then we're gonna go into info up at the top. Then we're gonna obviously scroll down to oil life, and then we're just going to press and hold select right here in the middle, and once you hold it long enough, you'll hear a ding and it will reset to 100%. So we are good to go for another year. So that's it. Now we're going to let the car warm up to 175 degrees, shut it off, and check the fluid level, and after that we're done. So I just hit 175 degrees. I checked the oil, and sure enough, the 9.5 quarts puts it literally right in the middle. Got a little bit of room to move if it warms up, but it's definitely not low. I know I've talked a lot about this procedure in the past with my previous Z06 oil change video, which I'll link up here if you guys haven't seen that. It goes a little bit more into detail. I didn't want to do the same thing again here, but I did want to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference in the oil, the fuel additive, and of course the cabin filter. So we're all good here. But that is going to do it for today's video, guys. So if you liked what you saw, give me a big thumbs up. If you have any questions about the oil change procedure, the fuel additive, or the cabin filter, leave them in the comment section down below, or shoot me an email, horse.power.obsessed@gmail.com, and I'll make sure you get an answer. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm going to have loads of content like this coming that you are not going to want to miss. And as always, guys, I will catch you in the next upload.